in a hotel room sitting together in handcuffs was a preacher of a large church, a school finance officer, like a public school system finance officer, and a fireman who was getting married the next day, all sitting in handcuffs together.
Welcome to Dark Minds, Shattered Lives, true crime from the trenches. I'm your host, Deborah Dobbs. I'm an author and a victim advocate with a reputation for rattling cages. So, do you get by Joe? You like Joe Scaramucci? Or, because I always call you Joseph.
Yep, I go by both, actually. So,
okay.
More people call me Joseph.
More people call you Joseph. Okay,
They
so
do.
that's what I do. I like to play around and say it with an accent sometimes. Joseph.
Makes me feel professional.
All right, good. All right, good. Then I'm going to call you Joseph. So if I said that you did 3 years in the Marine Corps, how do you feel if I say that? Like,
well, I feel like there's truth in it.
Okay. Is it offensive if I don't say 4? Do you get offended by that? Is that like a...
No, I would just look at it as a mistake.
Okay.
Not, it would blow right over my shoulders. I don't know. What are we getting at?
Okay. So I'm like totally ambushing you with this because I want to do this with people that served in the military, because someone, and I'm not going to say this guy's name because I think he's litigious. And I've got nothing, but and I don't even have a following, but I'm just starting to ask people this because this person, did, I believe, 2 years and 4 months in the Marine Corps, which I thought you had to do 4, but, and somebody said 2 and he got really offended, and that, no, I did 3. I did 3 years, and for you to say I did 2 shows you don't. It's like an insult to all veterans. It's disrespectful to veterans in general to get that wrong. So that's why I'm just asking people who are veterans, like, and to see how do you feel? What do you think? How do you feel when I get it wrong?
Probably actually worked for about a year worth, if I actually broke it down to what I did. But yeah, no, I did a lot of walking real fast, so it looked like I was busy. Yeah, I don't know anybody that would be irritated over that. That's a weird, I mean, obviously I think unless something was different at, in excess of 25 years ago when I went in, there's not even a 2-year contract. So I don't know. I mean, there would have to be some circumstance why they got out, which, sometimes it's very valid. Sometimes it's interesting to read.
Okay. All right. That's just going to be my question to veterans going forward, because, my father did 11 years and he would not have... He would have been like, whatever, you can round down and say 10. I don't care,
Yeah, or 2. It doesn't matter to me, really.
Right.
That's interesting. Now I'm going to poke people in the ass.
Okay, so what did you do in the Marine Corps? Because you were Marine, and so I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this because you've been on twice before, and I can put some of your bio in the description, but I know you're busy and you're going to have to go soon. So.
Yeah, I was a field artillery guy. I mean, nothing crazy, nothing high speed, low drag, nothing exciting. And even to take it at that, I wasn't a cannon dude. I was a fire direction guy. So I remember sitting at like the School of Infantry when they give you your job assignments, and I was what they call an 0844, and I was supposed to be a forward observer. And I remember saying that, and I was like, what's an 0844? And they were like, well, are you good at math? And I said, no. And they were like, well, you better get there. So I was the guy who did the math to say, okay, you're telling me that this artillery round needs to be landing here, and this is where we know the piece to be. So where do we have to basically point the cannon, and how many bags do you have to put in to make sure that round gets there? So I was the kind of the nerd behind the computer.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool.
Nothing special.
So, and then you went into law enforcement. You had a career in law enforcement.
I did.
And then briefly.
Public safety was the way to go. I love when people ask, like, what made you get into law enforcement? Because they feel like it's going to be this like heartfelt answer. And I'm like, well, I needed a job that didn't take a college degree to get a retirement. And the fire department wasn't hiring. So there I went.
It was very pragmatic of you.
Yeah. So yeah. And then, had my law enforcement career, and here we are.
And then in law enforcement, that's where you got your expertise. You started, kind of learning through mistakes, I guess, a little bit.
Yeah, I did.
With the trafficking.
Yeah. So my career was spent very shortly on patrol. I'm not a patrol guy. All the shout out to them, but wearing a uniform at midnight, driving around in a patrol car is not my cup of tea. So moved to investigations real quick. Did several years working sex crimes, death. So I was in our crimes against persons unit, had everything from capital murders to, adult child sex crimes, things like that. And then shifted into trafficking in 2014. And yeah, learn by failure, right? We were building a plane as we flew. We didn't know how to do trafficking. Unfortunately, in 2026, I don't think, there's still some agencies that don't really get it. They're still stuck in like the 1980s. And in that evolution, just started kind of learning as we went, and felt like some things weren't right, in mainly that being victims being arrested. So we try to figure out, like, how do we change this, and how do we do things different, and just did. And it, spun off from there. And I've been fortunate enough to travel the world and teach those methodologies. And
now you're with Skull Games.
Yeah. So now I'm with Skull Games. We're officially now SGS. We have transitioned from Skull Games because apparently the burning skull and the word Skull Games is too overbearing for some people. So we're SGS. We are Skull Games Solutions.
Okay. Skull Games Solutions, SGS.
SGS.
So I'm going to refer people to the earlier episodes that you were on. You had a huge beard back then. That talks about where the name came from and how you got into trafficking, and Chris Hansen's influence, inspiration, all of that. I'll have to put the episodes down. I can't remember them. There's this guy, Julian Dory. He's a podcaster. He's got a big podcast. He remembers every episode. He's in the hundreds. And he'll say, he's from Jersey. He's like, that was episode 214. And I'm like, I have no idea. I only had 11 episodes and I can't even tell you which ones you were on. I think you were on the first one, but you have a great story that we cover there. So what I wanted you to do today is, I still see these really terrible tips and misinformation all over social media about how trafficking victims are obtained, how they are lured in. And so it'd be perfect if you were able to talk about what you've done, because I know you help law enforcement agencies. So you're not out there conducting your own independent rescue missions. You are helping law enforcement learn how to do it.
Yes.
In their communities, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
So, who can do what with the information, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's always $1 million question. Like, I get people that are like, hey, I want to give you a tip. And I'm like, well, hey, unless it's in Waco, Texas, which is the only place I carry a badge and a gun anymore, it doesn't matter, right? Like, you have to be able to give this to the people who can do something with it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we train. So my bosses being former special forces guys, we use the motto that we work by, with, and through law enforcement. So we're at their hip, kind of advising on how to do this. That being said, what does that look like? It's not as flashy as people think, which I think is the difficulty in it, right? It's the public information piece. And we like, oh, I think, like, I'll be real and honest about it, right? We live in a world where people enjoy clicks, they enjoy likes, right? They're getting their hit from that, and that is what makes them feel good. And I think we can all agree to that. Law enforcement is no different. And we live in a world where now we've gone to a policing method that we, in many ways, I don't want to say cater to the public, we cater to the groups with the pitchforks, and we cater to what people want to see and hear.
What law enforcement is catering to?
I think so, in a lot of ways, okay. Right? Instead of just saying this is not real and having hard conversations, a lot of times it's easier to, in what I'm seeing, right, to kind of allow doors to stay open that should otherwise be shut. And I say this to say, we oftentimes are our own worst enemies when it comes to human trafficking and getting information out there as police departments, sheriff's offices, things like that. Because if I get online, if I get on Facebook and I say that, hey, you really need to be watching your 19-year-old kid on Facebook, because when we talk about who's statistically going to be trafficked the most and where are they going to meet their trafficker and how's this going to play out, I can tell you the truth is that your 19-year-old is going to get targeted on Facebook because they said they didn't have enough money to go do whatever. And there's some jackleg who's going to come along and promise them a rose garden and tell them how pretty they are. And then they're going to end up in a domestic violence style relationship and then get trafficked, right? Nobody wants to click like on that. Nobody
right.
wants to click like. But as the police department, if I say, this organization says that you need to be watching out because there's zip ties on car doors, and all we have to do is have this magical hand symbol for people to do to let us all know that they're being trafficked, you too could rescue somebody, right? That's going to get a bunch of clicks and likes. And the reality is, too, I think a lot of times I joke, and there's obviously truth to this, but usually I call the public information officer. At this point, they've become what I call the TikTok cops, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not always about getting the best information out. It's about getting community engagement. And that is in many ways setting the tone for what the news media is going to push out, what people are going to, share. I just saw a 3-letter agency share about this like hand gesture thing. It's total nonsense. It's absolute total nonsense. I know a group of people that have for years done the whole hand gesture thing in the airport to see if anybody would recognize and report them as being trafficked. And not a single time has this ever happened. So it's BS. But said 3-letter agency, you can't combat it, right? Like when I've said, hey, this is untrue, people have like flat out on social media been like, well, who the F are you? Like, what do you know? And I'm like, well,
a thing or two.
I read a book, yeah, if I was an author, maybe I could say I wrote a book, but it's interesting because a lot of those things that you and I have talked about in the past and that just continue, are also being perpetuated by law enforcement. And when the cop says it, it must be true.
It's like all cops can teach you to shoot. That's what I'll hear from people. Well, he's a cop. Yeah. I'm like, there's some of the worst shooters on the planet.
Go out on the range on any given day and see.
Yeah. They don't want to practice. I don't want to buy my own ammo. I don't want to shoot on my day off or go to the, stop by the department range if you
So I used to be a firearms instructor. I could tell you some horrific.
Oh, I bet. Wayne had these things called rock runs, and he'd sometimes get so frustrated with the cops. He was the firearms instructor, and that he just send them on a rock run, which was basically go over to that field or wherever and find a rock and bring it back. And it was just to get him away for a minute so he could not, chew him out.
I will throw a quick bone though. My favorite to instruct was always the female cops. I liked having female cops because they actually listened. They set their ego aside.
Yeah. He says the same thing.
Yep.
Prefers training women.
It was funny. I remember one time I had a guy, he was like, passed today, got me a 72. And I'm like, hey, you barely passed. God, how are we proud of this, buddy? So yeah, sorry we jumped into that.
I had a similar conversation because you and I have talked a lot. And so I will, when it comes up, redirect and go, well, according to some people I know, particularly one person who I will say is an expert in this, that's not how it works. And you really might want to reconsider letting your 10-year-old have her own YouTube channel. And, well, we watch it. It's really safe. And I'm like, they just don't want to participate. I said, and I get very blunt, like, how would you be willing to let your daughter go? Let's say they're going into a mall, and you may have given me this example. I can't even remember. You're going to go into a mall and there are these people behind the glass. So the people can see your daughter, but she can't see them. And they're all masturbating as she walks by, but she can't see it. Would you let your daughter go in there? Like, there may be a couple stores she wants to get to or the food court, but along the way, this is what's happening. Well, no, like that's what you're doing. When your kid is on social media, you're just like giving them free reign and you think you're paying attention. It's the same thing.
Well, I didn't give you that example, but that okay. I'm going to use that because that's the reality.
Okay.
And I haven't heard it put that way, but it's a strong reality. Yeah, I mean, so even to kind of echo what you're saying, I mean, I can't tell you how many times we would do search warrants on, what we now call CSAM, child sexual abuse material, and what a lot of people would refer to as child pornography. We would execute those search warrants and you would find in the midst of all of the like very illegal things, innocent, what would be innocent pictures of people's kids that they're just finding online because they're attracted to those kids, mixed in with everything else. So yeah, that correlation is not as outlandish. As I think is it may be. It's pretty spot on.
Okay.
So yeah.
Well, good. I thought you had given that idea to me. Can you tell me about a recent operation you had or anything? I know you post sometimes, but you're intentionally vague about things. I know you have to be, but is there anything you can share about some recent successes or I'll say success, but it's always shocking because y'all will post something and it's like, oh, this guy's, a doctor. This guy's, a pastor. This, it's like a cop. You arrested a cop recently, I think.
Yeah, that's very common. When we talk about successes on sides of victims, that kind of goes back to the things that people don't want to click on, right? Like, a recent success we had was a victim going to rehab, right? And that doesn't get a lot of clicks and likes, but that's a massive step for this young lady, right? So I think a lot of times we view success as like arrest, but only arrest if the trafficker goes to prison, and only prison if it's for life and not for 20 years. You can look at so many recent court cases where people have just exploded, Diddy being one, right? There's a lot of that. So we have to take what is a win and, try to articulate that on a case by case basis. When it comes to the buyer and predatory side of it, yeah, that's, man, I had in a hotel room sitting together in handcuffs was a preacher of a large church, a school finance officer, like a public school system finance officer, and a fireman who was getting married the next day, all sitting in handcuffs together.
Wow.
So those can be very interesting.
How did the sting operation work? How can you describe it at all?
Yeah. Can we pause that question? My dog is about to start barking at me to go outside. So would we run him?
If you haven't done it yet, will you please like this video and hit that subscribe button? It'll help me a lot. It sounds like a bad joke. A firefighter, a pastor of a big church, and a school finance official. Yes, all walk into a hotel room. How did they end up there? And like, how did that work?
Yeah, so that one was in the Tulsa, Oklahoma area. We put out ads for vulnerable people that are engaged in commercial sex. And what's interesting is there's no way to dangle a carrot in front of somebody, right? Like, I can't get online and put like a Facebook ad where I'm like, hey, selling my body today, right? So I say that to say, when all of these people are getting rolled up in these ops, they are going online to a particular website, going into search bars, searching very exact things in cities to then get to that, right? So they're actively seeking this all day. That one was, like I said, it was in the Tulsa area. We had a guy that was, I can't remember his exact role, but he had a history at a major Christian university. He actually drove from the state of Missouri to meet a minor. Mm-hmm. And then we had
how much of a minor, like?
I don't recall. We've got a middle kind of teen number that we use that is very below the threshold.
Okay.
What is,
so not 17, not 17.
No. Very below the threshold of what the law states is legal. I'll put it that way. Right? So he rolled up on that, all in the same time. Like I said, we had this guy was like the head of a pretty big church in Tulsa. And he was sitting there in handcuffs, button up shirt and sweater, next to the school finance guy who worked for the school district doing their finances and cried the entire time. Who is also next to the fireman.
So the firefighter was getting married, supposed to get married the next day, and he was arrested because he had gone to this hotel planning to have sex with a minor. And so he did not make his wedding.
He did not make his wedding. I think he made it out in time that he could have, but I think that the fiance decided it was probably not in her best interest to marry said fireman.
That's good. I hope she sticks with that.
Yeah, I always find it interesting that how many of them, 99% of the time, they're still together and in love, the next week. Man. So, it's always. It's
hard to admit you're wrong about somebody. That cognitive dissonance, it's very strong.
It is.
Very
but
strong.
I think the flip side too is it also shows how these guys operate, right? And how kind of slick they are, because usually what happens is, and it happens right in front of us, is, they're like, when they call them and they're like, hey babe, I got arrested. And if they're in custody long enough, you can hear the jail calls, and they're giving the old I'm just so lonely. You haven't been very present. And they start putting it on the wife or the significant other. And that significant other usually takes that and is like, I'm so sorry. I can't believe this. You're a piece of shit for doing this, but I understand because, and you can hear all that play out. So Wow. It's really interesting. It's very interesting.
Do they pretend they didn't know it was a minor? I mean, how do they get around that?
Yeah, a lot of times they do. What it's interesting too, because during the interview process with us, they'll usually give the whole like, oh yeah, I was going to meet this person and we were going to have sex and we were going to do all these things, but I thought she was 18. Like that's always the go-to. And you're like, yeah, but I'm her, so I know exactly what was said. Like I know the age, and it's obviously documented right here. And sometimes they're like, oh, I just thought it was a typo, or oh, I missed that. And it's like that 1-8 is pretty far from that other number, right? If it was 1-7 or 1-9, maybe I could go for the typo, but it's a few digits away. So, like it wasn't a typo. And we discussed things like, history class and whatever. So yeah, it's interesting. Do you know what the number one excuse that we get is though?
No.
If you had to guess, do you know what this guy would say when he walked in the door? Happens more often than not.
When he realizes he's been busted?
Yeah.
It's like, well, I was going to call the police because I knew this person was a minor. I'm trying to say, really?
Every time. I came walking in this door to make sure there was a child. I'm so glad it's you guys because I was about to call you is the number one.
Oh my God.
And you're like, but what about the money and the lubricant? And they're like, well, I just happen to have the cash, or, I just happen to have lube in my pocket. It's like, what?
So they want to be the hero. They want to be the hero. They're going to pervert it, their perverted selves, their perverted situation into they're the hero.
Yep.
Oh my God.
If you have anybody listening to this and they ever find themselves in the middle of a sting where they're going to have, where they're going to, at the end of the day, rape a child, just know that when you look the cops in the eye and say that you're there to help, we all know you're full of it. Just get that out. Find some other excuse.
Oh, and they must have had some bad advice where they think that's going to work. If they're all doing that, that's all right. So speaking of being the hero, we've talked before about these big organizations that get a lot of money, a lot of attention. I'm not going to name any because, again, these people. I see what they do when they don't really like the truth. Like you said, there'll be a sliver of truth coated in bullshit, but there's that sliver of truth in there. And so I know they like to, it's not that they're going to win. They're not going to win a lawsuit, but they'll bankrupt somebody in the process.
For sure.
So, okay. So one thing that we've talked about that I really like that you brought up is that, so I like to warn people about, against giving money to some of these organizations that aren't legit. Yeah. And one thing we've talked about that you mentioned was that when somebody's always the center of it, the hero, that's might be a red flag.
Yeah. So it's always an interesting conversation piece for me now. I work for an organization that has to have money to survive, right? And it comes to donations. So the way I try to explain it to people is if stats and numbers that an organization is putting out are overly impressive, they're probably not true. So I'll use an example, and I'll use a government example here. That way we can not target any specific organization. So one that is very well liked is Sheriff Grady Judd in Polk County, Florida.
Okay.
Right? So Grady Judd releases a press release here within the last month where his agency went out with all these partners and did this massive counter-human trafficking operation.
And the numbers were a bit over the top, or is this legit?
Well, the numbers are very high, right? The numbers are very like in the hundreds of people that they've arrested, things like that. So I'm trying to find it real quick so I can give you exact numbers. So they arrest 266 people as part of a human trafficking operation back on May 1st, right? So just a couple weeks ago. Of those 266 arrests, when you break it all down, their success rate on identifying victims of trafficking is something like, it's less than 1%. It's literally less than 1%.
So what is it?
It's like just these big sweeping operations. So they go out and they make all these arrests. Well, they give you the exact numbers. So as an example, when you actually break down the numbers, the people that they identified as likely being trafficked are, again, less than 1% of that entire makeup. And those people were also still arrested, right? So it's like, you're an identified victim, you go to jail anyway. When you break down the number of human traffickers that they've arrested, it's the exact same song and dance, right? So what's happening? We're doing these massive sweeps. We're doing these massive numbers, and they really are just shock and all numbers games. They're not quality arrests of people, right? So if you were to go out and do an operation and you have an organization, let's just say, that says we did a week-long operation, and in that we recovered 10 victims of human trafficking, and maybe we have like 6 traffickers in custody. That's probably very true, right? This is probably a very true number because it's small. Now, if you were to have an organization say we did this week-long operation and we recovered 200 victims of trafficking, they're lying. They're flat lying. And what they're doing is they're just arresting a lot of people for just like nonsense, to the tune of where I've seen where they'll do like an operation and there's like a DWI arrest. And you're like, wait, what? How? What? And they're like, well, I was headed home from the human trafficking operation and I got behind a drunk and he got arrested. And since it's part of this operation time frame, we included them. So you see a lot of nonsense. That being said, what then happens is these organizations go out and they're like, look, we just rescued 200 victims of trafficking. This organization only rescued 10. We need X amount of millions of dollars to sustain this. Right. Can you donate? Right. So I always tell people if it's a big number and the immediate feeling is, oh my God, this is off the charts, you need to be looking deeper. Okay. If it was and I'm saying this is like general public, right? If it's an operation where you see the numbers and you're like, oh, they had a week, it's probably a very true, real thing. Right? So,
and when you say traffickers are arrested, are you talking about what might be called a pimp or a client John type?
Both, right? So if it's a pimp, I try not to use the word pimp because we confuse what a pimp and a trafficker is. And I think when we look at it in terms of legality, a pimp is a trafficker where I can't, as law enforcement, prove force, fraud, or coercion, right? I can tell you it still exists. I can show that it still exists, but I can't prove that in court. So I may refer to that person as a pimp. Plus, that's just what people know, right?
He's a suspected trafficker.
Suspected trafficker. And that's what we call him. Person of suspicion. So when you look at a lot of what these big organizations are doing, if it's enough to make you put your coffee cup down in the morning and go, what the hell is going on here? We need to pause and dig deeper.
Okay. Now, I asked you about a book because I am an author. I have 3 novels. They're very realistic. They're fiction based on my career in victim advocacy. And I was very upset when I found out that this one book had more reviews or ratings than my 3 combined. And you were familiar with it. And I was hoping that not the ratings, but that the sales were perhaps law enforcement purchases, because it's Pimpology. And
and
it came up in
laws of the game.
Oh my God. And this guy, so there's a serial killer in San Antonio that just worshiped that guy. He had his name tattooed on his forehead, and they called him, they referred to him by that. He said it's kind of hard to hide who you are when you have that guy's name tattooed. You're easy to identify as a suspect, but he used some of the methods in that book to control his, specifically one bottom hoe. That's what he called her, which was actually supposed to be like a good place for her status wise. But he would murder someone and show her the body. And that's what's going to happen to you if you think you're going to leave this operation.
Yeah. So bottoms are interesting for a few different reasons, right? So we say bottom, you think automatically like the lowest of the low. It's the opposite, kind of what you said. So the theory, or where this comes from, is they say when shit hits rock bottom, she's the one that's going to be there. That's why she's referred to as the bottom. She's always going to be there. So she's going to be the closest to the trafficker. She's going to know probably the majority of everything compared to the other girls at work.
And she eventually came forward, and
yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with that case, but
I'm not.
I can't remember his name.
But with them, there's a lot of victim criminal overlap, right? So they are engaged in a lot of crimes, and it makes it's set up by the trafficker so that she becomes the fall, right? Which is always interesting too, because when I teach cops, I'm like, look, if she takes the fall, you are literally falling victim to exactly what this knucklehead wants you to do. But it gets dicey, right? So I have a friend that she was a bottom in a past life, and it was pretty rough. We teach a lot together. We have over the years, and what she brings up, and it makes total sense. She says, back when I was doing this, and he would tell me to go beat this woman, it was better if I did it, because I would show some form of mercy. Whereas I knew if he did it himself, it would be horrible.
So she could exercise some restraint.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Oh my God.
So, you got to stop too and think, like, what does that do to a person? Right.
Yeah.
Where
it's like a moral injury.
Yeah. So they oftentimes have the majority of the information. They have, committed crimes, but those crimes are generally committed because if they don't, then they're going to get hurt. You use the example with that young lady too. If he's showing her these dead bodies, she knows everything he's capable of. Whether anybody else knows it or not, she knows it. And that's probably a very scary place to be.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, they talk about, that's literally one of the chapters in the 48 laws of the game, is get you a bottom.
Oh my God. And so what else are there tactics in there? Do you remember? Because I'm not.
I mean, it's very street savvy. It's like spend another person's, they don't say person, right? Spend another person's money. He really explains like how to pimp, right? So for me, I actually give that book out to every investigator that we teach, because it's incredibly powerful. And what I tell them is, this guy is giving you the blueprint. Mm-hmm. So if somebody in a football game gives you the playbook and you can't beat them, you're an idiot, right? Like if you can't beat somebody who gives you the playbook, we need to find another career.
Yeah.
And that's what it does. I mean, it literally breaks down. And it's a very good, I don't want to say very good read, like in the sense of like, I want people to go, but from a tactical perspective of how do we beat this, it's a very good book.
It's a good strategic move to read that book.
Yeah.
And
it's like reading The Art of War. I mean, really, like it really truly is. If you're engaged in warfare, you want to read certain books, and that is the equivalent.
Do you know where he is? Is he still alive?
Yeah, I think he is, and I think he's just out on the streets. Like he's not like in prison or anything. But yeah,
earning royalties.
Earning royalties. So I do give the cops a bootleg version because I don't want them to go buy it. I want them to read it, but I don't want them to buy it. So for research purposes, we provide it.
Yeah, you could do like the Cliff Notes version.
Yeah.
All right. All right. So victims of trafficking, especially if let's talk about minors.
Yeah.
It's social media.
It is.
Even adults. You told me another one of those things that nobody wanted to hear. I had a friend, an acquaintance, a friendly acquaintance, who was posting it was so obvious that she was going through a hard time and she was looking for a man who would provide blah, blah, blah. And it was just so easy for somebody to slide. Like you spelled that out. Like you went on, that's another episode we did. You went on some social media accounts. You said, right now I can tell she's going through a hard time and she's hurting for money. And so you just like the post. Yes, you do. You just like the post. It's a gradual process. You might comment, you might see you have a mutual friend. Eventually, they start chatting, DMing, and it's not, hey, you want to, come and be a prostitute. And that's a great way to make money. It's get in a relationship and then slip into this kind of nefarious world.
Yep.
Okay. So and I told someone, it's like, you're really putting your vulnerabilities out there. And she was an adult. It's like, you could attract some bad people, and she didn't stop doing it. And
it got clicks, it's like, and likes.
Oh my God.
So I think something, to bring up with this, and especially with adults and kids, overwhelmingly year after year, the number one place where those who have been victimized say they were recruited was Facebook, Instagram, or Snapchat, right? Those are the top three. So we can all agree that, boom. When you look at cyber tips, so a cyber tip is when somebody downloads, and this is a 30,000 foot view, right? This is not everyone, but somebody downloads some child sexual abuse material, and say Facebook flags it, Meta flags it, and is like, whoa, problem. They report that to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, right? So tens of millions of cyber tips per year, right? Like, we'll just use 1 year, it was like 25 million, right? The person who is responsible for like 99% of all of those tips it's Meta-owned companies. It's Facebook and Instagram, right? So like 99%, like if you were to take away Facebook and Instagram reporting, there would be like no reports, basically, right? Maybe a million.
So it's not parking lots of Walmart.
No, it's not the dark web. It's not the mall.
Or when they go to the mall. Okay.
Yeah. I had somebody reach out recently too about like the dark web, right? And they were like, oh, this is my fear. And I was like, to truly get to the dark web, you have to know exactly how to get there.
Yeah.
Right.
You don't stumble into it.
You don't stumble into it, right? You don't just like Google trail some stuff and then all of a sudden it's like, hey, welcome to the dark web, right? It doesn't work that way. You have to try to get there. So I say all that to say, when we look at average ages, right, there's some discussion points on that. I'm not going to get into a million of those, but the average ages that we're looking at are about 19, 20 years old for people that are being trafficked. So what is our enemy? It is Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat for 19 and 20 year olds. It's not being kidnapped on aisle 5 shopping for gluten-free pasta. Like it's simply not. I had a woman a couple years ago now that reached out to me on social media and was like, hey, I want to talk to you about this. Like, I was at Target. I had my baby with me. This and this happened. And this guy was like going to kidnap my baby to traffic, I think. And I was like, rest assured, all is well. I was like, I'm not saying this dude's not weird. I'm not saying he wasn't trying to rob you. I'm not saying, I don't know. But what I do know is that baby was not going to get kidnapped and forced into sex trafficking in another country. And she said, well, you don't get it, I guess, because I make pretty babies. And I was like, you don't get it, I guess, because nobody looks at their baby and says it's ugly. Everybody makes pretty babies, right? Even the ugliest babies. You ask mom says that's a pretty baby. Yep. So I'm like, yeah, I think my work here is done. I don't think, and this is always interesting to me too. I had to tell somebody the other day, you came to me with a question because you trusted me with an answer. You don't like the answer, don't ask me the question.
Yeah.
You already have it in your mind what you want to hear. And if I'm not going to tell you what you want to hear, then why are we even having this phone call? But it goes back to every time. Well, I was doing this. I was at Target. I was at Walmart. This person looked creepy. And you just can't, very seldom are people like, okay, what you're saying makes sense, right? It's usually just like, well, you just don't know. And it's like, well, I guess I don't. Sorry you called. Have a good day. Can I have some of that gluten-free pasta? Right?
Okay. So I have good intuition, and I have a good, whatever my instant gut reaction to someone is, like instant, it's correct. And if I talk myself out of it, I usually regret it. And so people will say, well, I want you to meet my boyfriend and tell me what you think. I'm like, now I'm like, you don't want to know what I think.
Yeah.
Unless it tells you this is a great guy, he's a great catch. And if somebody will say, oh, you're going to love this person. No, I'm not. I can already tell if you're trying to sell me this person, like sell the personality to me. I'm not going to like them. And they don't want to know. They don't really want to know. And then it just hurts your relationship, because they know you don't like the guy. And like somebody, I remember even a picture, somebody showed me a picture. She's probably going to listen and be like shaking her head. And said, my brother wants you to look at a picture of his girlfriend and he wants to know what your instant thought is. And I was like, it was a very nice picture, but I said, she's really pretty and I wouldn't want to make her angry. I wouldn't want to get on her bad side. And she's like, how did he know that? She's just got a temper. And I was like, she's going to marry her. They're going to get married.
The twinkle in the eye gives it away.
And so same thing. It's like, and they want, I don't know. It was just so frustrating because that dinner with a person saying that, the kids were on YouTube, they have their own YouTube channel. There was one other person at the table who, she immediately got, she kind of stiffened. She's like, that's a bad idea. And so there wasn't just me. This woman also, she finally said, but why? Why do they need a YouTube channel when they're like 8 and 10 years old? God, they just shut it down. And then there's like Roblox is another one. Have you had any issues with that, or is that?
No.
There's some weird stuff on there. It's not even trafficking. It's just some really disturbing content that they get exposed to.
Yeah, I think anything with the internet, right, does that. There's a pretty popular podcast that I listen to that had some guy on there talking about like Roblox and
the kid who hacked.
764 group and all this. And yeah, I mean, it really truly is not that big of a concern to me. In any app, any platform where there is a communication piece, right, is a threat. It's undoubtedly a threat. But again, when you look at like things like 764, right, or whatever, the amount of kids that are being targeted in the United States by that organization versus by like the local schmuck up the street it's night and day, right? Yes, Roblox is concerning. That organization is concerning, but they're a fraction, right? They're a fraction of what's actually going on. So, I look at some of these parents that are like, no Roblox, these 764 will never get a hold of my child, right? And then the dude on Facebook who tells their daughter she's pretty is you know what I mean? It's like, hey, You're missing the mark, man. You're so narrowly focused right here that you're missing everything going on around you.
Thank you for listening to Dark Minds, Shouted Lives. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit that like button and subscribe. Until next time, trust your gut and know your exits.